Jim Blanchet, and this is...
I'm Alison Blanchet.
And welcome to the Growing and Living Conference. We are both residents here of Panama City, Florida, and we attend right here at this church. This church is...
St. John the Evangelist.
Right in downtown Panama City, and we'd like to welcome you to this conference.
Welcome to the Growing and Living Conference. Thanks for joining us. So on Sunday, October 7th, I was arriving home after a weekend retreat with our high school youth group. And it was one of those weekends where I was behind on all the household chores. Jim is amazing. He is very good at housework, and in fact, it's not that he helps with the chores. He often takes the lead on the chores, but that weekend we had both been running around. There had just been a lot going on. And Sunday afternoon, we looked around, and all I could see was, man, there's so much to do. We have bathrooms that could be cleaned, the kitchen could be cleaned, the floors could be vacuumed, but we hadn't spent any time together as a family. And our son really wanted to watch a movie and have some pizza. And against what felt like my better judgment, that's what we did. The house stayed dirty, and we had some family time.
So if we do a little bit of quick math here, fast forward to October 10th, and this is when Hurricane Michael made landfall here in the Panama City area, in the Mexico Beach area. And we came home to a roof that was half gone. Our entire front porch had gone into the backyard, took the roof with it, and put the roof probably 4 or 5 blocks away. Also, other people's roofs were in our backyard. We don't know where they came from. And everything in the house had caved in, and half the stuff in the house was completely ruined. There was insulation, twigs, water. Things from the outside were inside, things from the inside were outside. Everything was in a box shaken up. And everything that we knew was in a pile in our house or in the backyard.
And I don't want to make light of the damage caused by Hurricane Michael. It was catastrophic for our area, and many people are still recovering. So what I'm about to say, I just am being honest about what my first thought was, and that just shock of coming in and seeing our house like this. Well, I'm glad we didn't spend all day Sunday cleaning. Okay, but seriously, I do look back on that day as a big lesson in what was truly important, because we sorted through and put a lot of stuff in a pile in our front yard. It was a pile that ended up being probably taller than us, and obscured the street. I can't tell you a single item that was in that pile, though. What I can tell you is this. When we were driving back into town for the first time, we still didn't know about a lot of our friends that we had, that had, whether they had evacuated, whether they had stayed. The cell phone service was disrupted, and so it was very, very hard to make contact with people and find out what was going on with their safety, with their well-being. And so I remember just driving back into town, and we pulled into the Home Depot to get a truck that we were going to use to help with some of our cleanup. And when we pulled in, I saw the first person from town, the first person that we really hadn't heard from, that we didn't know anything about. And I was crazy. I was just so excited to see that he was okay. And he was on the phone stealing the Wi-Fi signal from Home Depot, talking to his relatives. And I don't think I even turned off the car. I just left the door open and started banging on his window. And I can remember just crying and being so relieved that he was alive and that he was okay. And I just gave him a big hug, and he's like, "What is wrong with you?" But it was just that sense of relief and joy. And that day, I really had a new appreciation of understanding the value of life, and just how much we don't always realize that.
So we can see from the complexity of the storm all the way down to the simplicity of finding one of our friends at a location we didn't even realize brought us true joy. And it reminds me of the parable in the Bible that Jesus talks about. In Luke chapter 12, this is the parable of the rich fool. And the important thing here is to what do we what is abundant in our life, these relationships, these simple things we find, or a pile of stuff that used to be in our house in the front lawn. And the parable reads, Jesus says this, he told them a parable. There was a rich man whose land produced a bountiful harvest. He asked himself, what shall I do, for I do not have space to store my harvest? And he said, this is what I shall do. I shall tear down my barns and build larger ones. There I shall store all my grain and other goods. And I shall say to myself, now as for you, you have so many good things stored up for many years. Rest, eat, drink, be merry. But God said to him, you fool, this night your life will be demanded of you. And the things you have prepared, to whom will they belong? Thus, will it be for the one who stores up treasure for himself, but is not rich in what matters to God? So with that parable, it's critical to ask ourselves, what is it like to live in tough economic times? And here's a little disclaimer, I hate to use that word, but
this is not a budget talk. Dave Ramsey has some great resources. If you want to know how to manage your finances, don't ask us.
What was it? Be a gazelle?
Be a gazelle.
Or a sloth or something that runs fast?
It's great.
Not really sure, but not a budgeting course. But what this is talking about tough economic times. And we'll get into this later, but being poor, not just economically poor. But what I think it's critical to remember is during distress or economic times is the root of the word Catholic. And we all pretty much know that it means universal. And the challenge is to not think about universal so much in terms of people and nations, but think universal as time. Just as the Eucharist is the center of Catholicism, the Eucharist is timeless. And it knows no bounds. And through time, there's been many wars, famines, tsunamis, earthquakes, mudslides, and even hurricanes and pandemics. That's what we're talking about today is hurricanes. So we have to remember that the Alpha and the Omega, there is distress in all of it. And what I like to do is to live simply, is to look at the lives of the saints and realize there's distress in all of those lives that they persevered through. And that is really our faith stretched across time and in a sense doesn't know time, and we're all sharing in that universal church.
So when we look at living simply and our tradition, our legacy as Catholics, it's not so much an economic status, but really an essential aspect of discipleship, that this is a way that we follow Christ. We all know intellectually that people are more important than things. However, sometimes our actions can say otherwise, and it can be hard to make those actions. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus is approached and asked, what must I do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus says, if you wish to be perfect, sell what you have, give to the poor, and follow me. But practically speaking, what does that look like? Most of us are not in a situation where it would be prudent for us to sell all that we have, but it can still manifest itself in different ways according to our vocation, according to the experiences we find ourselves in, and according to our gifts and talents. This was something that we had talked about before we were even married. We wanted to be sure that we were pursuing Christ together and not getting caught up with all the expectations and images that the world presented us with. Right away, there was a lot of pressure when you're planning a wedding to just get stuff. It's a huge marketing industry. Don't get me started. But to just try to really stay centered and focused, because we were both older and already had everything we needed to start our lives together, we didn't have a gift registry, and instead we really just asked for people to make donations to a charity that we loved.
That we shared together and we had
together.
A bond with. So we could strengthen that bond through other people sharing into a shared interest that we had experienced together. So when we're looking at earthly things, we have a tendency to sometimes view the other side as bigger than what we have right now. And I bring up this analogy because this is Florida. We've all been to the beach. We love the beach. Some of us don't like the beach. Why can't we just go to a pool without sand? Okay, that's enough of that. But imagine you're on the beach and you're there to play in the waves. We've all played in the waves, right? So how many times have we looked to either side of us and realized the waves are bigger over there? Oh man, and they're really big over there. They're not that big right here. So we swim over to the side and start bouncing in the waves and realize, man, this is unsatisfying. I thought they were big over here, but they're really not. Let me go back over here where now they look like they're big. You swim over there and man, same thing, not that sad. Now they're huge everywhere else. What's with these waves? This is life. We're there to enjoy the beach, but we have to learn to simply enjoy the beach. It is what it is, and you are where you are.
In Jim's metaphor about pursuing different things, what happens when we try to swim to different waves? We get tired. And in the same way, when we try to pursue all these different ideas that are presented to us about happiness, about fulfillment, about safety, about wealth, we can get exhausted. There's a lot of ideas out there about what it looks like to have the right house, the right car, have your children dressed and go to school a certain way, or you name it. And none of those things are bad in themselves, but when those become our goal, it can lead to spiritual exhaustion and really takes away our ability to live in being what rich and what matters to God. That storing up our treasures in heaven and recognizing that it's the value of relationships that are important. So we've constantly tried to find ways to be rich in what matters to God. And again, that's going to look different for different people. The encounters we had with our friends after Hurricane Michael really stand out to us as showing us what was important. That putting our energy, putting our lives, putting our lives into things that were eternal, into these relationships, into investing in love, were building up our treasure in heaven. And this was a profound experience that really showed us the importance of relationships.
So being a Catholic and being simple is being a Catholic where you are, not going somewhere else to be a Catholic, or more importantly, waiting for something to be perfect to go over to and be Catholic and live simply. So, and that brings us to how we got into foster parenting, because we realized in Bay County, we are in Bay County being Catholic and supporting a culture of life, and we find children in dire need of homes and families and people to love them. And to us, that is the best way to support a true culture of life where we are, and not being totally perfect at it, and not have everything lined up, and not being over where the waves are huge, and granted, being tired getting just to where the waves are that we're in.
And it can be challenging to say yes to a child joining your home for an unknown amount of time. And it's very, very hard to say goodbye. But our experiences have shown us that so much of life is uncertain. We never know how much time we have. And so our treasure can be found by investing love into these opportunities for relationship when they present themselves, and just answering that call. God has called us to share our lives and our love through foster parenting, but it looks different for each individual, each family. And I think in tough times, we can be tempted to be cautious. We think we have to look out for ourselves. We have to be sure that we're providing for our immediate needs. And it can be scary to step out in faith and maybe do something that we're not sure we have the resources for or anything. And I can think of, there's been many times where we've feared that what we had wouldn't be enough, but God has always provided. It can be really hard to say yes to a child joining your family when you're not sure how long that's going to be for. and saying goodbye is so hard. But our experiences of going through Hurricane Michael really taught us that we never know how long we have, and we never know what could happen. And so it's so important to answer that call to love and to invest in relationships when we have the opportunity. And in tough times, it can be tempting to be cautious. We can be afraid that if we put ourselves out there, we're not going to have what we need. And we can speak from experience that we did not have what we needed. We had no idea what we needed, but God provided. I can think of a specific time when we had just started talking about welcoming a second child into our home, but we didn't even have a second bed. We were still in a very, very early stage of this conversation. The very next day, we got a call asking if we could take a child that needed a home. We said yes, even though we had nothing ready. We had about an hour to get ready, so we picked up a toothbrush and trusted that God would provide the rest.
And this child showed up with a single bag, with a shirt, a toy, and a favorite watch. Mm-hmm. That's it, just a bag. This is what I've got. Here we go. Oh, at least we got a toothbrush.
However, through the generosity of our friends and total strangers, by the end of the weekend, we had everything we needed. Even a bed that somebody came and helped us put together very quickly. There's probably a fine line between trusting God and being foolish, but we've yet to reach the point where God's made fools of us for trusting him. Like I said, the yes to God looks different to each individual, each couple, each family, because we all have different gifts, different talents, and different resources. But our Catholic faith compels us to ask, where is Christ in my midst, and how can I share what I have with him? Ironically, it's our experience of loss through Hurricane Michael, destroying everything that was underneath our roof, and also our experience of having children in our lives for sometimes only a short time, that's really showed us what is most important. It's the people, it's the relationships that we need to invest our time, our energy, our love, and our faith into. These are lessons that are difficult to learn when we're in the midst of trials. And I know right now we're all encountering trials of our own, but I hope we can offer some hope that even though it can be a struggle in the midst of it, these times can also lead us to such a deeper understanding of what really matters.
And we have to remember that when things get washed away, literally washed away in this case, these are sometimes earthly things. These are things that the Bible talks about washing away the flesh and things of this earth. And in that simplicity, we find God. And in those moments of the stillness and the quietness of our lives, we truly find a simple, loving, and true God.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We hope that you'll take time to chat with us after this presentation.
Thank you.